So we're continuing to talk about the love and fear of Hashem. Last week we talked about the 3 and 7, the 3 mothers and 7 children, or the 3 intellectual faculties and 3 emotional faculties within a person. And today we are going to work on the process, the path. The path is a good word. That's a word for today. Today we're, it's Erev Rosh Chodesh Nisan and April 8th, and we just experienced a partial eclipse. But the word that's used is the path of totality, right? So today we're going to talk about the path of achieving fear and love of God.
Okay.
So what's the path to get there? Of course, it's a very tall order, but it's accomplished through understanding and appreciating the greatness of Hashem. So we're up to the words Uveir Ha'inyan. I'm not sure where it is on the online version. In the OG Tanya, it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines in. It's at the bottom of page Zion in the original print of the Tanya.
What's the Hebrew word?
Uveir Ha'inyan.
Uveir Ha'inyan.
The word before it is Chabad, or Toldot Chabad.
That's the beginning word of that line?
No, the beginning word of that line is Lamidos. Which, I don't know which print you have.
I'm just using the one from JewishArcadia.com, the link that you put in there. And I'm on chapter 3.
It's a
I could just follow along.
Uveir Ha'inyan, yeah. Okay. Uveir Ha'inyan, to explain this idea further, and as we'll go along, the Alter Rebbe will explain in detail the path through which one gives birth to emotions, godly emotions, by utilizing the Chabad, by utilizing the intellectual faculties of wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. But before understanding how to use them, we have to understand what it is, right? Just like any complicated machinery, before learning how to operate it, some people say, okay, press this button and this will happen. But that's not really a way to do something thoroughly. You want to do something thoroughly and in a way that it should last. You say, okay, this is what this machine is. This is what it accomplishes. This is what it's used for. And now that you understand all that and why there's these buttons and those buttons and so on and so forth, say, okay, now if you turn on this switch, such a thing will happen, right? Similarly, when we're talking about our intellect, we have to understand what it is before we actually go ahead and use it. You should always use your mind, but obviously we're talking about using it for a specific purpose. So what is this Chachma and this Bina? And how can you, through them, create feelings of love and fear of Hashem? So he continues, Kihine, for behold, Haseichel shebenefesh hamaskeles, the intellect, which is in the intellectual soul. We'll soon see what that is. Shehu hamaskil kol davar, which is what thinks about all sorts of things. Nikra b'shem Chachma is called Chachma. So let's understand. The godly soul is also sometimes called the intellectual soul. Why is that? Because in the godly soul, the intellect reigns supreme. In other words, it's the ruler over all the other faculties. And even within our body, it says that the godly soul rests in our mind, in our heads. And that's why the emotions of the godly soul are a result of the intellect. Because in the godly soul setup, in the structure of the godly soul, the intellect is where things begin and things flow from there. Now, the definition of the power of intellect is the ability to perceive an intellectual idea in a way that it penetrates the mind of a person and is absorbed within a person. That is the power of intellect. Now, in order for any idea, any intellectual idea to be absorbed in the human mind properly, there's a path of 3 stages, right? Just like the path of totality passed through Texas and Arkansas and Illinois and Quebec, whatever. So there's different phases along the path, right? So along this path of achieving proper use of one's intellect, there are 3 intellectual faculties, 3 intellectual stages, if you will. So we're going to first focus on the first 2 of 3 stages, the Chachma and Bina, and eventually, later on in the chapter, we're going to get to Das, or Dat. So let's contrast Chachma versus Bina. The power of Chachma is the first stage of the 3 stages of intellect. And in that stage, a person perceives the general point of an idea or a theory. In other words, in every idea, in every intellectual idea, there's the dot, the point of that idea. And then in addition to the key point, there's also details that spread to the east, to the west, to the north, to the south, up and down. Kind of, it makes it a more comprehensive idea that has a lot of details that you could explain. You could elaborate on its impact and whatever. However, in the stage of Chachma, all that you're absorbing is the key point. You're not getting all the details of the theory. Because when you're just absorbing the key point, you still don't comprehend it fully. You just get the general idea. So, for example, somebody who's working on a very difficult topic, whatever that topic could be. It could be a halacha being discussed in Jewish law, trying to figure out, let's say, if something's kosher based on how many percentages and how long it was used and this and that and the potency of the flavor and all sorts of different complicated questions that might come up. Or perhaps you're trying to figure out some mathematical equation. You're trying to understand how, the distance of the moon to the sun and this and that. And it's very complex, calculations that you're trying to figure out, and the timing and the distance and this and that. But there's a particular question that you need an answer to, right? And you're busy thinking back and forth and something's not clicking, right? You're just not getting it, and you're gathering data and you're trying to figure things out. Unsegeitnicht, as we say, it's just not going. But then suddenly, like a lightning bolt goes off in your head. You're like, hold on. I see the answer, but I don't quite get it. But I feel like if I explore this more, I'll finally get clarity, right? So that moment when you're like, oh, something new just happened, right? That is what we call chachma. That's like, oh, hold on. This is worth exploring, right? But you haven't yet explored it. You've just discovered it. That discovery is the stage of chachma. Now, you still can't explain why discovering that is going to answer your question. But it's kind of like a seed of an idea, and you somehow know with certainty that if I explore this further, if I take this apart, if I open up this little seed over here, I'm going to see something much bigger and larger, and greater details will be revealed to me. So chachma is this ability of the mind to grasp a new idea, to either come up with a new idea or to discover a new idea. But it's just the idea. And that's why the Tanya says Chachma is, if you switch around the letters a little bit, it's Koyach Ma. It's the Zohar says that Chachma mean, which is translated as wisdom, is Koyach Ma, the power of what? So what does that mean? It's like somebody who discovers something that he's never seen before, and he says, "What is that?" Right? Maybe it's an alien that shows up in your backyard. You're like, I've never seen that before, right? You're like, what is that? Now, that might reveal a lot of things to you. The alien might tell you what life in Mars is like. I don't know. Who knows, right? But it starts with the question of what, right? Curiosity. What is that? What is this new phenomena? What is this new idea? So similarly, the power of Chachma is the power of what? Because the stage of Chachma doesn't answer all the questions, but it prompts us to ask what lies deeper than this? What else can I see within this idea? And now we get to the next stage in this path. So the Alter Rebbe continues, and when he brings out the potential into actuality, that he uses his mind to understand something clearly and deeply, out of a particular chachma idea which came to his mind, nikra bina. That second stage is called bina. The bina is the second stage in the intellect, meaning it's the second stage in the path of opening your mind. After a person got the idea, the flash of the idea, he now has to contemplate or meditate about that idea and to begin to take apart this idea into many details. So it's kind of like you have this little seed and you're like, wait, this is going to answer my question. I'm going to take a microscope to it, not physically, but philosophically to it, and I'm going to piece it apart and see all the little veins or whatever that might be in this tiny little seed, and it's going to reveal to me tremendous things. So Bina is the ability to start delving into something very deeply. Because only after a person understands something very clearly and has a full picture of something can he go deeper into going into another layer of that idea. So it turns out that in the first stage, in the stage of Chachma, the understanding of a particular idea is still only in potential, right? When you're struggling to understand the mathematical equation, you're struggling to understand the answer to a halachic question, and you finally, get that thing that stops you in your tracks and says, oh, wow, that's an idea. That's a potential for an answer, right? It doesn't really answer your question yet in the first stage, but you now know that you have the potential to discover an answer. But through Bina, through the intellect understanding something, taking it apart and opening it up, now your understanding or the answer to your question can now come into fruition in actuality. So that's why the Alter Rebbe says, when you take this potential of Chachma and bring it into actuality, that process is called Bina. Now, this pair, the Hein, these two are of Va'im Hamaylidais Avas Hashem V'Yirasei Upachtei. These are the father and mother that give birth to the love of Hashem, to the fear of Hashem, to the trepidation of Hashem. All of those emotions can only come after the father and mother join forces together to give birth to those emotions. So, based on what we explained about the difference of Chachma and Bina, we can understand that this is analogous to a father and mother, because the father in the process of childbirth and actual physical existence is the father provides the seed, which the seed has the potential for all the limbs of the child. However, it's the mother, after the seed remains in her womb for 9 months, the mother is the one who brings out all the limbs into actuality and forms a fully functional child. Similarly, when it comes to our intellect, the chachma is the seed of wisdom. That's why it's called the father. And the opening up of that idea into actuality and understanding all the details, that's called bina and is analogous to the mother. So chachma and bina are the parents that give birth to the children of loving Hashem, fearing Hashem, all those good, positive emotions towards Hashem. Now, just as with a physical father and mother, it's only the beginning of the birth that comes from the father, but the actual birth is done by the mother. So too is in the nimshal, in the analogy that we're trying to give here, is that it's the bina, the second stage of the intellect, that's what really causes the emotions. So the Alter Rebbe continues, Ki ha-seichel shemenefesh hamaskeles, for the seichel, the intellect and the thinking soul, meaning the godly soul, kishem isbainin umamik ma'od bigdulas Hashem, when it meditates and goes very deeply into the greatness of Hashem, meaning when the godly soul activates its tool, its faculty of bina, to start thinking deeply and meditating deeply and really using its brain in full capacity to think about the greatness of Hashem. In other words, the chachma itself, the dot, the seedling idea, is not enough to give birth to an emotion. Because it's just an idea. You don't feel, you're not going to feel emotional towards that thing that you're having an idea about. It's only once the idea is opened up through the power of bina and it's fully absorbed in your mind, then the midas, the emotions, could start working. Because it's only after the bina is activated that the idea or the person or whoever it is that you're thinking about comes closer to the person, and then the thinking person is able to have a feeling towards that thing as well. And the same is true when you're serving Hashem. That in order for the greatness and exaltedness of Hashem to actually cause any change of feeling in the person, that a person should feel love or fear to Hashem, it's not just enough to have a superficial understanding and a general knowledge about godliness. Especially since we're talking about godliness. Godliness is very far removed from the normal things that human brains think about. So a person can just say, oh, God, sure. Just say the word God and I'll suddenly start feeling, all sorts of emotions. Most of us don't work that way. Yeah. Some people say God and in the same sentence, they curse him, right? God forbid. It's a 6-letter word and then it's followed by it, right? God, it, right? So obviously somebody who's saying that is not actually thinking about God, right? So to really feel a love and a fear of God, it requires deep contemplation and meditation. And the Alter Rebbe says further, I feel like this requires a class in and of itself, but just examples of what does it mean when you think about God, not just think about the letters G and O and D or a dash between the G and D, but we're talking about much deeper things. Things like God filling the whole world, that God's presence exists here in every being. B'sayviv kolamin, and God surrounds, encompasses the world, encompasses the moon, encompasses the sun, encompasses everything. Or another idea, and again, we'll go into these more next week, is kula kamei kalachashiv. Everything in front of him is like nothing. Here we have all these things. My arms are so wide, and my house is bigger than my arms, and the city that I'm in is bigger than my house, and the country I'm in is bigger than the city. And we're like, wow, that's like big. And then like the planet is even bigger. And we're like, whoa, these things are so enormous. And to God, it's all garnished. It's all nothing. So when you start to appreciate these ideas, God is here, God is there, and all of these here's and there's are really nothing to Hashem. Oh, okay. I'm starting to understand what this God thing is that we're talking about. So these are the kind of exercises that helps our brains better perceive and absorb this idea called godliness. And the more we absorb that, and hopefully can somehow hop over from the stage of Chachma into the stage of Bina, that gives us the hope and the potential that we can eventually create emotions of feelings for godliness. And that's, broadly speaking, the path towards loving and fearing Hashem. To be continued. We'll go into these concepts a little more next week in Mitzvah Hashem. Obviously, Erev Pesach, the day before Pesach, there will be no class, but we will have class next week. And then I guess it's a 3-week break because it's going to be Yom Tif the next Monday. So next Monday, April 15th, will be the last class in April. All right?
Okay. Well,